In a bustling city, there was an old toy store. The exterior of the store looked ordinary, but it was said to hide many terrifying secrets. Many years ago, the owner of this toy store was an old craftsman who made lifelike toys that were loved by children. But after the old craftsman passed away, strange things began to happen in the store. The new owner was a cold-hearted, middle-aged man who had no interest in the old craftsman's toys and only wanted to make more money. He started making toys with cheap materials, resulting in much lower quality. However, strangely, these toys seemed to have a life of their own, and eerie things happened from time to time. One day, a little girl came to the toy store and was attracted to a beautiful rag doll. The doll had big blue eyes, wore a luxurious dress, and looked very cute. The girl begged her parents to buy the doll for her, and they agreed. Back home, the girl played with the doll every day. However, it wasn't long before her parents noticed something unusual. Every night, they could hear whispering from the girl's room, as if someone was talking to her, but when they checked, they found nothing. One night, the girl's mother suddenly woke up from a dream. She heard laughter coming from the girl's room, cold and eerie. She rushed into the girl's room and found her sitting on the bed, staring blankly at the rag doll. The doll's eyes seemed to glow with a sinister light. The mother tried to take the doll from the girl, but she held onto it tightly, refusing to let go. Sensing something was wrong, the mother woke up the girl's father. They decided to take the doll outside and throw it away, far from their home. However, the next morning, they found the doll back on the girl's bed, as if it had never been discarded. They realized something was wrong with the doll and decided to go to the cold-hearted toy store owner for answers. The owner listened to their story and merely smiled coldly, saying, "What you took wasn't an ordinary toy, but a masterpiece of the old craftsman. These toys have their own life, and if you don't treat them carefully, they will get angry." Terrified, the parents decided to seek help from the old witch in the town. The witch, after hearing their story, gave them some special herbs and a chant. She told them that they must burn the herbs and recite the chant at midnight to dispel the doll's evil spirit. That night, they followed the witch's instructions, lighting the herbs and reciting the chant. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through, and the doll began to tremble violently, emitting sharp laughter. The girl's parents held her tightly, trying to keep her from being frightened. The doll's eyes flickered with the sinister light, and finally, after a piercing scream, the entire doll turned to ashes and disappeared. From then on, the girl never saw the terrifying rag doll again, and her life returned to peace. However, this incident spread widely in the city, becoming a horror story adults used to teach children not to take toys lightly. The toy store owner was also shunned because of this, and the shop eventually closed down, with no one daring to step into the Eerie store again. In an ancient village, there was an abandoned cottage that people shunned. Years ago, a tragic incident had occurred there, leading the villagers to believe the place was haunted by ghosts. The protagonist of this story is a young photographer who specializes in capturing images of ruins and haunted houses. The photographer heard the story of the abandoned cottage and decided to visit it for a photo shoot. He didn't believe in these supernatural tales and thought they were just superstitions. With his camera slung over his shoulder, he set off alone to the cottage. The cottage was in ruins, with doors and windows hanging by their hinges and weeds growing all around. Undeterred, the photographer walked straight in and started taking photos. He wandered around the house, capturing various angles. However, when he reached an upstairs room, he felt a sudden chill. In the room was a large mirror, covered in dust and cracks. The photographer took a photo of the mirror and then continued to explore other rooms. But when he looked back at the mirror, he saw a blurry figure slowly approaching him in the reflection. Startled, the photographer turned around but found nothing behind him. He looked at the mirror again, and the figure became clearer, a woman in white, with a pale face and vacant eyes. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but the photographer couldn't hear any sound. In a panic, the photographer snapped a picture of the mirror and then dashed downstairs, fleeing the cottage. When he returned to the village and reviewed the photos on his camera, he was horrified to find the woman in white appearing in all the pictures. No matter which room he had photographed, it was as if she was following him. Feeling something was seriously wrong, the photographer sought out the village elder for advice. The elder listened gravely to his story and confirmed that a tragedy had indeed occurred in the cottage years ago. The woman in white was the daughter of the cottage's original owner. She had perished in a fire, and her soul had been wandering the cottage ever since, unable to find peace. The elder gave the photographer some special talismans and told him he had to return to the cottage, find the mirror, and recite an incantation in front of it to free the woman's soul. Despite his fear, the photographer decided to follow the elder's instructions. Late at night, the photographer returned to the abandoned cottage and approached the large mirror. He lit candles, took out the talismans, and began to recite the incantation. Suddenly, the woman in the mirror started to cry, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. The photographer continued to chant, and the woman slowly faded away, eventually turning into a wisp of white smoke that dissipated into the air. The cottage fell silent, and the photographer felt a warm presence enveloping him. He knew the woman's soul had finally found peace. The photographer returned to the village with his camera and showed the villagers the photos, proving what he had experienced. The villagers were shocked and awed. They repaired the cottage and erected a monument to honor the innocent woman who had lost her life. From then on, no one in the village feared the cottage. Instead, it became a revered place. In an artistic town, there's a legendary Eerie painting. It was created by a genius artist whose works were always filled with intense emotions and deep implications. But one painting, in particular, instilled fear and unease in countless people. The painting depicts a sinister forest with a bottomless well in the center. Standing by the well is a figure in a black cloak, face obscured by shadows. The background is dense fog, exuding a strange and eerie atmosphere. It's said that ever since this painting was created, it brought ominous premonitions. The protagonist is a young art appraiser who heard about the Eerie painting and decided to visit the artist's studio to investigate. The studio is located in a quiet corner of the town, surrounded by a tranquil yet eerie atmosphere. Upon entering the studio, he finds the painting hanging in the most prominent position. As he examines it closely, he feels a strange chill, as if the figure in the painting is watching him. He decides to buy the painting and takes it back home. After bringing the painting home, he hangs it on the wall of his living room. Strange things start to happen. Every night, he hears low breathing and faint footsteps coming from the painting. At first, he thinks it's his imagination, but the sounds become clearer and impossible to ignore. One night, he suddenly wakes up from a dream to find himself standing in the living room, facing the painting. The fog in the painting seems to be moving, and the shadow by the well becomes clearer, as if it's about to step out of the painting. Terrified, he screams and runs back to his bedroom, locking the door. The next day, he seeks help from the village's old witch. After hearing his story, she tells him that the painting is possessed by an evil force and requires a special ritual to break it. She gives him some herbs and a chant, instructing him to burn the herbs at midnight and recite the chant in front of the painting to dispel the evil spirit. At midnight, he follows the witch's instructions, lighting the herbs and reciting the chant. Suddenly, the fog in the painting begins to swirl, and the shadow by the well becomes more active. The shadow lets out a low laugh, and the entire painting seems to tremble. He continues chanting, and the shadow gradually disappears, eventually turning into a wisp of black smoke that vanishes into the air. From then on, he no longer hears any sounds from the painting, and his life returns to normal. However, the story of the painting spreads throughout the town, becoming a topic of conversation. People begin to hold more reverence for works of art, especially those with intense emotions and mysterious implications. In the suburbs of the city, there was an abandoned train station known as the Lost Station. It was said that this train station was once bustling with activity, but one night, it mysteriously disappeared from the maps, and no trains ever stopped there again. Every night, faint train whistles and the rumbling of tracks could be heard, sending shivers down the spine of anyone nearby. The protagonist of this story is a young man with a fascination for supernatural phenomena. He decided to visit the Lost Station to uncover its mysteries. He brought along a camera and a flashlight, embarking on this solo adventure. At night, he arrived at the abandoned train station. It was overgrown with weeds and vines, with the dilapidated platform looking particularly eerie. He switched on his flashlight and started filming. Suddenly, he heard a distant train whistle. His heart raced, but he pressed on. As he walked to the center of the platform, the tracks beneath him began to vibrate as if an invisible train was approaching. He quickly grabbed his camera to capture the moment. Just then, fog began to roll in from all sides, making it hard to see. He felt a chill and realized he had entered the ghostly realm of the Lost Station. Through the fog, he saw an old steam train slowly pull into the platform. The doors opened, and the carriages were filled with strangely dressed passengers, whose eyes were vacant, as if they had no souls. He mustered the courage to approach the carriages and tried to talk to the passengers, but they did not respond, seemingly unable to see him. Suddenly, a conductor in a tattered uniform appeared before him. His face was pale, and his eyes were cold. The conductor whispered, "You should not be here. This is the station of the dead." Fear gripped him as he tried to run, but he found himself trapped in the thick fog, unable to find a way out. In his moment of despair, he remembered the protective charm and incantation he had brought with him. He took out the charm and began to recite the incantation. As he did, the fog slowly dissipated, and the station returned to its original state. The ghost train and its passengers vanished without a trace. Relieved, he hurriedly left the eerie place. When he returned home, he documented his experience and uploaded the video online, causing a sensation. Although he had escaped the Lost Station, the terrifying memory of that night would forever remain etched in his mind. In an old mansion, there was a legendary haunted attic. It had been uninhabited for years, filled with dust and cobwebs. Every night, strange footsteps and whispers could be heard. People said a ghost lived in the attic, searching for her long-lost child. The protagonist of this story is a young woman who just moved into the old mansion. She was skeptical about supernatural phenomena, but loved exploring new things, so she decided to investigate the haunted attic. One night, she took a flashlight and recording equipment and went up to the attic alone. The attic was dark and damp, with a musty smell in the air. She turned on her flashlight and began to look around. Suddenly, she heard the sound of low footsteps and faint whispers, as if someone was behind her. She turned to look, but saw nothing. She took a deep breath and continued her exploration. In a corner of the attic, she found an old rocking chair covered in thick dust. She shone her flashlight on the chair and saw it gently rocking, as if pushed by an invisible force. At that moment, she heard a ghostly voice whispering in her ear, "Child, where are you?" Terrified, she stepped back, and her recording equipment captured the eerie sound. She decided to leave the attic and return to her room. The next day, she played the recording for her friends, and they were all frightened by the voice. She decided to investigate the mansion's history further, and discovered that the previous owner was a woman whose child had gone missing in an accident. The woman had lost her sanity and eventually committed suicide in the attic. She decided to help the poor mother find her child's whereabouts. Hoping to release her spirit, she began to search through old newspapers and archives and finally found some clues. The woman's child had been kidnapped by traffickers and was eventually adopted by a kind family in another city. She contacted the child's descendants and told them the story. They were very grateful and agreed to come with her to the old mansion to soothe the mother's spirit. That night, she and the descendants went to the attic, bringing some of the child's belongings. They lit candles and began to pray, hoping that the mother's spirit could rest in peace. Suddenly, a gentle breeze filled the attic. The rocking chair stopped moving, and a sense of tranquility permeated the air. They felt a warm presence, knowing that the mother's spirit had finally found peace. From then on, no more supernatural occurrences happened in the old mansion, and the attic remained calm.